The first scream hit before the garage door was halfway up, a glassy, high-pitched fire alarm of a voice knifing across the cul-de-sac and straight into my spine. "Thief! That's my car." She barreled across my lawn like a storm front in pearls, her perfume arriving a second before her clipboard, her body wedging between the rising door and the frame so hard the safety sensor panicked and bounced it back down. I stood there with the key fob in my palm and a paper plate of leftover barbecue balanced on the top of a trash can, blinking at the white SUV I had spent 18 months rebuilding engine by engine like a prayer I could drive. She planted herself in the mouth of my garage as if she'd sprouted from my concrete. "You stole my delivery," she hissed, every vowel sharpened by entitlement. "That is my spec, my trim, my color. Call the police." "Oh wait, I already did." She was shaking with theatrical adrenaline, phone pressed to her ear, eyes bright with the kind of certainty that only grows in a mind that's never met a fact it couldn't steamroll. The tow truck appeared as if summoned by her volume, idling at the curb, orange beacons smearing the dusk. The driver hesitated when he clocked my plates and the county registration sticker on the windshield, but Karen waved him forward like a conductor inviting the brass to blow the roof off the symphony. "Hook it," she ordered, thrusting a neon violation sticker at my fender with a meaty palm. HOA bylaws forbid commercial repairs in view also stolen goods. I should have been scared. Instead something quieter rose in me, a tired calm I only get when absurdity is so loud it drowns out anger. "Step away from my property," I said, my voice low enough to make the tow driver glance at me and then at her, as if he'd stumbled into a play without a script. I pressed the fob. The SUV chirped and flashed, a little mechanical wag of recognition that felt like loyalty. Karen lunged, slapped her hand over the hood emblem, and dragged her nails down the paint like a threat you could buff out but never forget. "This is my VIN," she declared, because she believed that shouting transformed opinion into metal. She shoved her phone into my face. On the screen, a dealership stock photo of a similar SUV sparkled under studio lights. "Mine. Paid for yesterday. Everyone in the neighborhood knows." Her smile was the cruel kind people mistake for confidence. "Look what you made me, doc, all 911. The first unit slid in quiet, lights off, because Officer Lang knows our street and the way sound travels here. He stepped out and made everything boring on purpose, the gift of a good cop, and asked for ID. I handed him my license and a clear sleeve with my title, registration, and a fat sheaf of receipts I'd kept like a ship's log. Karen shoved her papers into his other hand and started narrating the alleged theft like she was pitching a show. "He stole my delivery off the transporter," she said, jabbing her finger at the sky as if a truck was still up there. "He's been hiding it in the garage. I saw him. I have witnesses." She gestured to two women behind her in yoga pants and fear, who stared at their shoes and the shrinking distance between their choices and the truth. Lang flicked through my paperwork and asked the question that always divides a day into before and after. "Who has the keys?" I raised the fob. The SUV blinked again, sweet as a dog whose only trick is loyalty. Karen produced a fob of her own like a magician at the wrong show. She pressed it so hard her thumb blanched. "Nothing." She pressed again, harder, like the laws of radio frequency could be bullied. "It's out of range," she snapped. He changed the codes. He hacked it. I hit start from the fob. The engine turned over, a soft growl built from weekends and scraped knuckles and the quiet patience of men at parts counters who learned my name. Lang's face did a small, private thing I recognized as relief. Could have de-escalated there, but Karen marched the other way. She broke the invisible line at the edge of my garage and reached for the driver's door, fingers closing around the handle like talons. "Ma'am," Lang said, firm now. "Don't." She yanked anyway, hard enough to set the alarm barking. She was committing a crime, right there under the sensor light, and it thrilled and terrified her because she thought consequence couldn't find her in a zip code with fountains. The tow driver flinched, backpedaled, muttered not towing a car with plates, and Karen threw her voice at him like a brick. "You work for us." He didn't. He worked for his mortgage, and something in his spine decided in that instant he liked truth better. "You want to see truth?" I asked, and without waiting for permission, I tapped my phone and cast the feed to the small TV I keep over my workbench. Old baseball game paused at a good inning. The screen filled with a grainy slice of daylight from earlier that afternoon. A transporter cab hissing to a stop in front of my driveway. A driver in a reflective vest lowering the SUV. Me signing for it. His pen scratching my copy while he took mine. The camera angle widened to catch the whole scene. And there she was across the street, camera at her face, filming me filming life. She'd posted that video to the HOA group with a caption that said this thief is stealing my car. Another windowed clip popped up, my doorbell cam catching my hand on the garage keypad. My dog's nose framing the bottom edge. My cousin Eli behind me carrying a box of parts we'd been waiting for like it was Christmas. I swiped to a PDF. The bill of sale, the bank transfer, the VIN, the inspection sheet with my signature and the transporter squiggle. The date stamped in the corner was yesterday, same as her screenshot, except mine wasn't a promise, it was a receipt. Lang took his time reading because time is another tool a good cop knows how to use. That might have ended the show, but then a small voice threaded through the noise. I know whose car that is, it said, and everyone turned. Mrs. Patel from 2 doors down stood with her groceries and her granddaughter, a doughy toddler chewing a fistful of wind. Mrs. Patel lifted her phone and tapped a doorbell app like a magic spell. The video played. A dealership delivery earlier in the week, not of Karen's dream SUV but of a smaller model. A loaner dropping for a test drive, dealer plates flashing in the late sun. The salesman stepped out, his face small and familiar to anyone who's ever pretended to enjoy the smell of a showroom. He unloaded paperwork and an apology. Sorry, Ms. Albright, the financing didn't clear yet. We'll try again Friday. Try again Friday? I repeated, and watched the color drain from Karen's cheeks like coffee going down a sink. She'd been performing ownership of a car she didn't yet own, building a launch party in the HOA newsletter for a vehicle that still lived on a sales floor. She had panicked when my white SUV arrived first. The same paint, similar trim, and instead of letting facts survive, she called the cops to make reality kneel. I could feel the neighborhood teetering between embarrassment and anger when the twist arrived that nobody scripted. A red sedan eased to the curb and out climbed a man in a dealership polo, tie askew, face the particular shade of someone who knows he's about to play a role he didn't audition for. Mr. Cordell, I'd met him months ago when I bought a serpentine belt at cost because he said he liked neighbors who did their own work. He looked at my VIN, looked at the folder in his hand, looked at Karen, then at Lang. Officer, he said, voice steady like a shelf, I'm the sales manager at Wayfarer Motors. Ms. Albright placed a pre-order on a higher trim. Her HOA issued a letter of community partnership she suggested would qualify her for a discount. We declined. Her financing hasn't been approved. The vehicle she claims is hers is still on our showroom floor behind a velvet rope I did not ask for. He swallowed, then added, and the 2 times she asked us to deliver it early, she emailed a photo of. He stopped, choosing kindness over spectacle. Of a different car. He handed Lang a printed email chain with dates and an invoice list that ended at a 0. I don't know whose SUV this is, he said. Eyes on me now. But it isn't hers. Karma rarely arrives on schedule, but this was close. Another cruiser rolled in. Sergeant Ruiz stepped out, the community liaison who has a talent for turning gasoline arguments into water. She listened for 20 seconds, then turned to Karen. Ma'am, she said, calm as a lullaby, you filed a 911 report alleging a theft you could not have witnessed because the item you claimed stolen was not yours and not present. You approached and touched property after being told to stop. You attempted to direct a tow of a registered vehicle without legal authority. This is false reporting and trespass. Karen sputtered, words falling out like screws. HOA authority, brand standards, crime prevention. Ruiz did not blink. We don't do brand standards here. We do law. It could have ended with a citation and a lecture. It didn't because the universe had one more hinge to swing. Miguel, the HOA treasurer who never looks anyone in the eye, hurried down the sidewalk, sweat darkening his collar, a folder clutched like a life preserver. He stopped at the edge of my driveway and addressed Ruiz, then Lang, then me. I'm sorry, he said, the 2 words so heavy they bent the evening. She made me draft an emergency HOA expenditure for a community asset vehicle. She tried to categorize it as safety branding. When the board refused to sign, she said we'd take back a similar car to pressure the dealer. She pointed at your house. He folded, unfolded, and refolded a copy of an email where the subject line read, Lumbo later, SUV now. I didn't sign. He glanced at Karen, then away fast, like staring at the sun. I can't do this anymore. The street did a strange thing then. It got quiet around the edges, and the only sounds were small. The hum of the idling cruiser, the hiss of my water heater cycling, a dog 3 houses over sneezing. Ruiz asked Karen to step to the curb. Karen called the councilman she name-drops like a talisman. He didn't answer. She called the news. Nobody picked up because it wasn't that kind of story anymore. Ruiz read the statute in a voice that left no air pockets. Karen, grand on every other day, looked smaller than I'd ever seen her. A cocktail of rage and humiliation curdling behind her eyes. She wasn't handcuffed, but consequence had a shape anyway. A citation for false reporting, a misdemeanor trespass charge, a court date, and a no-contact order with me and my property. The tow driver signed as a witness and then left in a hurry like a man escaping a weather system. Lang slid the neon sticker off my fender with 2 fingers and handed it to me like a dead thing. Keep it for your scrapbook, he said, and we both smiled because there wasn't anything else to do with the stupid. It didn't end at the curb. The next evening the board called an emergency HOA meeting in the clubhouse. I went not out of spite but because ghosts leave faster when you watch them go. The room smelled like coffee and long years of indoor shoes. Miguel sat with a stack of documents and an exhaustion that made him brave. He read out the bylaw Karen had been wielding like a sword. It turned out to be a butter knife, meant to keep abandoned junkers off lawns, not to police people's lives. He read the emails where she had weaponized the phrase property values to justify harassing paramedics, tow trucks, and anyone with a toolbox. A neighbor played Karen's 911 call which became public record by Morningen, a tinny phone speaker. It didn't sound like safety. It sounded like theater with sirens. The board voted to censure her first, then to remove her from the presidency, then to bar her from speaking for the HOA in any capacity. The room exhaled a breath nobody knew they'd been holding. She tried to crash the meeting, to carve the air into blame, but real security, hired by the receiver the board brought in months ago to handle the books she'd muddied, escorted her out with a care I wish she had ever extended to anyone else. The last part happened slowly, which is the only way good things happen if you want them to last. My mailbox collected apology notes the way fall collects leaves. Small, earnest, rustling with sincerity. Mrs. Patel sent samosas. The tow driver left a gift card for car soap on my porch. Ruiz stopped by a week later with a copy of the incident report and a wink. You handled it, she said. I shook my head because I hadn't. The neighborhood had, through 100 tiny decisions to respect evidence over ego. I hung a wooden sign by my workbench with a message I wrote in my left-handed chicken scratch so I'd be forced to read it slowly every time. My garage, my car, truth wins. I didn't put it there to taunt Karen. I put it there to remind myself that when someone tries to steal your reality, the right answer isn't to scream louder. It's to turn on the lights and let the facts do their quiet work. I still see her sometimes. A figure hoofing down the sidewalk with empty hands and too many opinions, pausing at corners like the world might ask her permission to keep spinning. The court made her do community service she hated and training she mocked and a restitution line that didn't sting as much as it should have. That's fine. The real punishment is being uninvited from the power she thought she owned. The real lesson is ours, that a lie can call 911 and still lose to a little patience and a VIN. If you'd been there that night, you would have seen a neighborhood choose to be a community. You would have watched a cop decide boring was brave, a treasurer decide honest was safer than complicit, a tow driver decide no was more valuable than a fee, and a salesman decide truth mattered more than a sale. You would have seen a garage door rise and fall and rise again, this time all the way, spilling light onto a driveway that is just concrete but also the line where a story changed direction. That's my account of how it went. Tell me where you stand, who was right, who was wrong, and what justice would look like if the shouting started in front of your garage.